Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for being here. Without any question, I find myself in a position where I'm once again very proud to be a South Carolinian. Frankly, if you think about where we have been in the criminal justice footprint, you can look at states like South Carolina and Georgia and Texas to see where the criminal justice reform package came from. The fact that the President signed the First Step Act does not mean it started in Washington, D.C. It actually started from the success stories that we were hearing from states like South Carolina that was able to bend the recidivism rate, which led to safer communities and a lower population of the incarceration of people. That's news. We saw that and we took that example, a whole cloth, and we wove it into federal legislation that today is known as the First Step Act. The conversation around police reform really starts in the same place in places like South Carolina, where we have led the charge. We've led the way in presenting to the world effective ways to respond, A, to bad situations, and B, how to avoid those bad situations. And what you see in my legislation, with the great support of many senators, is A, the police reform, B, accountability, and third, transparency. We believe that in order for us to have the type of police reform that leads to safer officers and safer suspects requires as much information as conceivably possible in the same place, the FBI. Only about 40% of departments around the country today report information on serious bodily injury and death as it relates to their departments in the use of force. We think that should be closer to 100%. The same is true with the situation in Louisville, Kentucky, Breonna Taylor, the no-knock warrants. We want more information so that we have a chance to design better policy. We don't want to rush to the finish line and say that this is the best policy when in fact we have no information that supports that policy. And we go a long way in the direction of understanding where we go as a nation in this very important moment as it relates to the necessary relationship between law enforcement and communities of color. What is not necessary is a binary choice in that relationship. We don't have to be either for law enforcement or for communities of color. We have learned at home, and we're trying to teach the world, that you can actually be for both. And the first step in that direction is reform. The second step in that direction is accountability, and that to me means training, and more resources so that we have the tools at our disposal to lead to the healthiest outcomes possible. This journey for me started in earnest in 2015 at the death of Walter Scott, shot in the back 5 times. I've always said that if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video is worth 1,000 pictures. Had it not been for the camera, that action would not have been real. We would have read the police report and come to a conclusion. One of the fastest ways for us to have accountability in the system is to support more resources for body cameras. This, according to the studies, reduces, it de-escalates tense situations, and there's a 90% improvement in outcomes and a 60% reduction in the use of force simply by having body cameras or videos. That is a very important part of the accountability component. Another aspect of the accountability component is, in fact, the utilization of grants and resources to have more specific training on de-escalation. Very important. And the more resources we have so that the officers can feel that they can do their duties in the most effective way and the safest way for themselves as well as for the citizens is key. And the duty to intervene, the ability to develop policies and to train to those policies requires more resourcing. A part of the legislation includes a commission that will focus its attention on what is in the President's executive order, which is around the importance of co-responders. We have to have experts in the field with the officers, and this is something that's been asked for since the early 80s when we saw a shuttering of so many of our mental health facilities. We are down, from my last understanding, of around 600,000 fewer beds in America today than we had 30 years ago. The impact of that is we're asking officers to do things that they have not necessarily been trained to do. Mental health issues, addiction issues, and homelessness. These issues might be better served by having co-responders coming to a scene, and I think that will save lives without any question. And that's all a part of the accountability. And then finally, on transparency. Information matters a lot. What you do with the information matters tremendously. And that's why we're focusing so much of our time and attention on bringing more transparency into the system so that we have more understanding and appreciation of what's in the records. That is where we talk about the necessity of preserving the records of officers. This is the conduct component of transparency. The ability to preserve the records on the local level allows the president's executive order that speaks to the creation of a national database for misconduct. In order to have that national database to be as effective as possible, it requires a preservation on the local level. We believe that allows for a seamless transition. And in the transparency, or I should say in the accountability area, there's been a lot of talk about the banning of chokeholds. We do it in a very similar fashion as the House bill does. And what we basically say is if you want the federal resources, we're going to look for those departments that have already banned chokeholds. Talking to local and state law enforcement agencies, in most cases in South Carolina, it's already been banned. And so what we're trying to do is reward positive behavior and direct the resources to those departments that reflect that. That is also the case in the president's executive order from a certification process. He requires in the executive order the certification to be met for those local departments through basically a forum that also bans chokeholds as well. So the good news for the American people is that my bill was designed after we had a chance to take a look at the House bill. So you'll see a tremendous overlap between the two pieces of legislation. Our bill was also designed in consultation with the president's objectives around his executive order. He did not have a chance, nor did I ask him, to take a look at my legislation before we finished it. But I did want to have a chance to peer into his executive order so that I could see what he was going to do, and then create a complementary system without much overlap so that we are doing the job that the American people should want us to do, which is simply to create an environment where the officers are safer and the suspects are too, and that we are building in accountability so we get there. Thank you for your attention.